طيب السلام عليكم شباب.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام.
طيب I think it's time to start. So before we start, just a reminder that quiz 1 will be next Sunday إن شاء الله. تقريبا كم 20/9 yeah 20/9 Sunday. Okay, so 20th of September. So it's most probably going to be on Blackboard because that is the kind of the first choice for quiz conducting quizzes. I will also prepare it on Microsoft Teams as a backup, just in case we run into any problem. I will instruct you whether to go on Blackboard or MS Teams. Okay, but we're gonna conduct it as usual using hopefully using Blackboard. طيب, so let me kind of explain to you the plan for today, inshallah. So I think we stopped around this slide last time, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think I did not cover all the steps fully. So hopefully, inshallah, today we'll go over the steps for conducting risk management, and at the end, hopefully we'll have enough time. We will break out into groups, and I will ask you to do like a group discussion or kind of applying these steps on a use case, which is the contact tracing application for COVID-19. And again, it doesn't have to be really technical. You just need to think about the requirements. I'll explain to you what does contact tracing application mean. Try to kind of like brainstorm with your colleagues to what are the like functionalities that really needed in this application, and what are the privacy risks. Okay, so at the end of the discussion, hopefully we'll have a number of privacy risks, potential risks in these applications. Then maybe the following weeks we're going to talk about privacy design and some technical or technology that kind of like address some of these risks. Okay, so this is kind of a good discussion, just in order to like apply whatever risk management process that we cover today on a real case. Any question? Right, so let me just put it in full screen, then we can start. Who's this? Okay. So again, just as a review, a quick review. Last time we concluded our discussion about privacy terminologies, and then we talked about the different approaches for privacy and data protection laws, and then we started into an important process, like which is like how to assess the risk and the impact of privacy, or in general how to manage the risks resulted from collecting and processing personal data. So basically, we had a few definitions, few terminologies. Threat, which is an event, usually a bad event that might happen, and as an example, as either natural disaster or cyber attack. Vulnerability basically is an exposure in your system or in your software that can be utilized to realize a threat. Okay, so for example, any misconfiguration in your, let's say, system, like let's say you forget to reset the password, that's actually a misconfiguration, or right. So this is a vulnerability that allows threat to be realized. For example, like some applications come with standard or kind of like some operating systems, they come with let's say open ports that allows like attackers to like do basic hacking techniques like port scanning and IP scanning and port knocking and IP scanning and so on, like to knock down your system. So these are all considered vulnerabilities. Now, this is kind of the figure So a threat is, again, an opportunity to exploit a vulnerability. And once the vulnerability is exploited, that resulted in a risk. And based on the risk, right? Based on the damage that happened with the risk, we can compute or calculate the impact, which is basically as a function of cost, whether it's financial or maybe reputation, maybe in terms of data, depending on the assets that have been compromised, whether it's tangible or intangible assets. So basically, these are the definition, and we had, usually in security lingo, they have this equation that kind of is not really an mathematical equation that you use to compute the quantity of a risk, but it's like as an indication. So basically, it's the probability of a threat multiplied by the likelihood of vulnerability. Okay, so that's kind of quantifies the risk on your resources or assets. Again, so the objective of this slide is, or this lecture is not to give you a detailed process of how to do risk management. Probably you can have more information in another course, like the information security course, or and I think in CE it's called 451, and ICSF for the 444 maybe. So they might talk more about like how to manage the risk in terms of information security and so on. Really, the objective here is to talk about the risk management from privacy point of view, okay, not from the security point of view. The last thing we talk is like the definition of the risk management process according to the standard ISO 27K series. They define risk management as the systematic application of management policies, procedures, and practices to the activities of communicating, consulting, establishing context, identifying, analyzing, evaluating, treating, monitoring, and reviewing risk. So the main three terms that I'm looking for here is how to identify a risk, how to analyze the risk, meaning what, how, and why it's happening, and evaluating what is the impact of that risk. Okay, so this is the kind of the agreed steps for any risk management procedure. First is establishing the context, identifying the risk, analyzing the risk, and evaluating. Okay, and these three steps, I put it in red color because they constitute a sub-process under the risk management process called risk assessment. Okay. So risk assessment is actually, part of it. Mostly it's kind of, technical work that needs some experience in the privacy and the security of the resources and the system that you are dealing with. The rest are more like, more like document work and paperwork. It doesn't have, you don't have to have very technical knowledge. Nevertheless, I will go over it one by one just to have like an idea of what do we mean by that. This is kind of a pictorial graph. Again, we are more concerned about this three steps, okay, that constitute a risk assessment. So what do you mean by context established? By the way, do you have any questions so far? So this was kind of a quick revision. Any questions? Okay. So moving on. So what do you mean by context establishment? Basically, is to define the scope and boundaries for the organization structure. Okay, so you have to understand what is the context that your company or your organization is working on, what data that you are collecting, on what is the nature of processing, of data processing that you are dealing with. Maybe I give you an example of like I always give you the example of health institutes and financial institutes. The nature of data processing is totally different. One is mainly dealing with banking transactions, like financial information of a person, and the other health institute working with patients' information and history of diseases and so on. So the nature of data processing and the purpose of using data is totally different. So you have to be aware, right? So you cannot do this the risk management in a hospital, in a health institute, the way that you're going to do it in a financial institute. You have to put things in context. You need to understand what is the objective of protecting data privacy. Is it just to comply with data policies, like to avoid, like paying serious money to as a consequence, or is it, let's say, the one value that the company or the organization is looking for, So it depends on the objective. Naming stakeholders, who are the data processors, the data subjects, the data controllers involved in this process. Roles and responsibilities, which department, or what is the structure, organizational structure that will take care or oversee this process. As I mentioned last time, almost in every IT department, in every organization, they must have something called a group, or the Department for Information Security. And in that department, there is always this group called GRC, Governance, Risk Management, and Compliance, where they oversee the compliance of the IT department or the organization in general with data protection law. And a friend of yours or a colleague of yours draw my attention that there is this whole suite, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, the Chief CTO, the CIO. There is also the CDO, the Chief Data Officer, the one that oversees how data is collected and how it is used and so on. There's also the Chief Information Security Officer, right? There's also the Chief Privacy Officer, where this guy mainly oversees and look for how the company or the organization is complying with the privacy laws and make sure that there are no breaches of privacy. So this is really important to put things in context. Specification of records, as I mentioned, what records are you collecting from subjects? And at the end, or the last thing is, you have to put some criteria of the evaluating the risk and accepting the risk and so on. So this has to be agreed on at early stages, so that when you start managing and identifying, analyzing the risk, you decide what is the treat. How are you going to treat the risks? The next important step is identifying the risk. Okay, so basically is you need to understand at the technical level. You need to understand what systems and what tools you are using in your organization, and then understanding what vulnerabilities, right, that exist in your system, and then that will give you an idea of what threat, okay, that might exploit such vulnerabilities, and hence you have a good idea of what are the potential risks in your system. Okay, so let me give you an example. If you have a server, let's say Windows server, right, and you are not keeping updating and that, let's say, by visiting some websites, they know that there is a common attack or one viral attack that is hitting Windows server, and that your machine or your server is not updating, is not patching the operating system. So that there is a vulnerability, right? So you have to identify this risk. So this particular server is at risk. If a hacker, let's say, get into the server, he can, damage a lot of stuff in your organizational company. So you have to be aware of all these aspects. So you have to gain insights of how, where, and why the loss might happen, right? So as you see, look, if this server is, let's say, isolated, it's just a sandbox, nobody's using it, just for development. Yes, it's risky, but the impact is not that severe. But if that server is let's say, hosts an operation, is as at operation, right? Like some software in operation, and it's connected to other servers, now this is the impact is very severe. Okay, so you have to be aware of the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure in your organization. So there are many kind of let's say tips or guidelines of how to identify the risk. First, identify the assets And again, because we are more focusing on privacy risk rather than security risk, we are only concerned about the assets, which are the PIIs, the personally identifiable information. Then you need to identify the threats that might, might happen, either the application level, right? If you use certain software or certain application, and you know that this is, let's say, outdated, and this is vulnerable to attack. Maybe at the communication level, you are not using proper firewalls, you're not using proper, let's say, you're not using, let's say, for example, encrypted communication. You're using plain FTP rather than using SFTP. You have to be aware of all this information. And also system level. So it's widely known that if you have a complicated system, right? So you have multiple systems connecting to each other, then the attack surface grows larger, right? Because like if you have a Windows server connecting to a Linux server, so the interaction between them might not be very organic. That allows hacker to exploit some vulnerabilities between them. Sometimes it's from the audit trails. Like if you, let's say, keep a backup copy for every transaction in your organization, and you store it in a place that is not really, like secure and private, that's a problem. So even the logs, although it's not under operation, it's still a threat to privacy. Identification of existing controls. Again, that's why I mentioned you have to be technically aware. What are the solutions that the organization is adopting? Are you doing encryption? Are you doing, let's say, basic anonymization? Also, you need to be aware of the organization structures. Who is the responsible guy on, looking for overseeing the privacy concerns? Also, legal. If you have any, let's say, contracts with let's say you are aware that your organization is collecting data, but you cannot see the contract or the agreement with those subjects of data collection, like where you are collecting their data, right? So now it's an obligation that you also look for, like the contracts and the agreements, and make sure that like the data collection is consistent with those agreements. Identification of vulnerabilities, right? Whether it's like from personal, there is like a weak link of human power, maybe from hardware and software. So that's why usually like there is in terms of like while looking for vulnerabilities, security experts, they usually they have like a system called Nessus, where they share all the vulnerabilities found in globally in all the systems. So you have to be like aware also or updated with all the vulnerabilities that is going on in whether in hardware or software. Maybe you are following an obsolete policy, right? That like with outdated technology that will result in some privacy breach. So I think the point here is risk identification needs to be like looked at holistically, right, from different aspects, not only from the technical level, but like you have. So that's why risk assessment or risk management is a continuous process. It's not only done at the before doing the project, but also during and maybe after delivering the project. Any questions so far? So like just as a form of interaction, raise your hands. Like just click on the button of hand raising, and then lower it again. Okay. Right. The third step is you can lower your hand. The risk analysis. Okay. So once you identify all the risks, you need to understand what is the damage associated with these risks. Okay. Whether the risk is intangible or intangible assets. Usually during the risk analysis, like most of us, like engineers and scientists, would like to quantify it with numbers, right? So there are two ways to quantify a risk. To analyze a risk, either quantitative analysis or qualitative analysis. And the common thing, or the kind of common practice in qualitative analysis, is to use what is called 5x5 matrix, where in one dimension you have the consequences. Is it insignificant? Is it minor, medium, major, or catastrophic? On the other axis, it's the probability or the severity of, the probability of that risk to occur. You have rare, unlikely, probable, likely, certain. So basically, while doing the analysis, you usually look for the lower left corner, right? Because it's like the consequence is insignificant and probability is very rare, and this is like the ideal region that you operate with. However, if your service, let's say, have a catastrophic consequence, and the risk is really certain, right? So let's say you are publishing some data set, and this data set contains some private and confidential information, and you know that people, or like bad people, malicious people, are eager to get their hands on such data, right? So why would you release it? Why would you publish it online? So you have to like consider that while like this is just an example, right? But also it applies into like in software release also, or quantitative analysis using some numerical scale. And again, they usually use something similar to that equation, the likelihood of occurrence multiplied by the severity, okay? And that will give you kind of the level of data privacy. In terms of vulnerability, there is a known website called a known scoring system called CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System. I think it's maintained by Nessus, maintained by, so it's a database of all the vulnerabilities, and with that vulnerabilities there is a score from 0 to 10, okay? Meaning how likely that vulnerability will be exploited. So we have the major, or what is that? Very dangerous vulnerabilities, like scoring 9 and above. Your organization should be like be really aware of those kind of vulnerabilities. Okay. The last step in the risk assessment is the risk evaluation. See, now in the context establishment, I told you there is one step, which is like agreeing on the evaluating criteria for either accepting or like treating the evaluating or accepting the risk, right? So these for example, those two tables kind of a common or a standard way to deal with risk with multiple with various risk values. So for example, in a low risk value, the evaluation criteria could be like reduce the risk considering the cost of prevention compared to reduction the risk. So you need to kind of have like an evaluation. Okay? If we have a low risk, how should we evaluate it? All in terms of acceptance. Okay, so if it is, let's say, a low risk value, you can accept this with document justification. What does that mean? So if you have a service or a software that you want to release, and after the risk identification and analysis, you found out this is a very low risk. Okay, so just release the software, and if any risk happened, so just accept that risk. Okay, so yeah, I release that release that software, and I'll take full responsibility of whatever damage that might happen, either like paying compensation, withdrawing the service, or whatever, right? However, if it is a very high risk, that depends on the what they call risk appetite on the organization. So let's say if your organization is like they like to, let's say, gamble, right? So they take risks. So that's okay, like the benefit that I'm gaining from like releasing this software will outweigh the risk that might happen. So let's just release it, right? And some companies, they say no, let's like what is called risk avoidance and risk aversion. Let's wait until we are sure that at least minimize the level of risk until we release this piece of software. So it depends on the like the acceptance criteria and the strategy that the company or the organization is following. Now, after the risk assessment, right, there is this step called risk treatment. So how are you going to treat the risk if happened? There are 4 ways, like agreed on. Risk acceptance or risk retention, as I mentioned. Maybe, for example, if let's say some damage happened in terms of privacy leakage, the company will take responsibility. Say, I accept this risk, right, and I'll take the responsibility. Like we're gonna do whatever is needed to fix the issue or compensate victims. Risk mitigation, for example, is like to go and modify what is risky. So, like again, if you have a software, an application in operation, and after the like the analysis and identification, you say, okay, there is some risk going on here in this application. Okay, go and modify it, right? So put some control measures to kind of mitigate the risk. Risk transfer, sharing, which for example, some companies really they pay or they purchase insurance, right? Just in case if a damage happened, they will transfer this risk, the consequence, to the insurance company. Some, for example, they are collaborating with a third-party company. So let's say they say, like, if there is anything that happens, any risk, we're gonna share it, split it 50-50, 40-60, depending on the agreement between the third party and the company. Or risk avoidance. Okay. Again, some companies say, I don't want any trouble. If there is a problem with this application, shut it down. Okay. I don't want any risk. So this is kind of the different treatment of risks depending on the organization. And as we will see later on, there are some, I don't want to say easy solution, but quick fixes for privacy. Anonymization is one. Pseudonymization is another. And maybe encryption, right? So identifying where is the risk, and then use the right encryption scheme to mitigate such risk. So this is kind of process summary. And
Doctor,
yes,
I have a question. If you go back to the slide, I didn't understand the risk sharing or risk transfer.
Right. Risk transfer. It has many meanings, but one of them is, like if an organization can, get an insurance company on board, right? Just like, like when you insure your car, لا سمح الله سويت حادث، مين اللي يتحمل؟ الانشورنس، صح؟ شركة. Same thing here. If some damage happened because of the identified risk, insurance company will take care of all the consequences. So that's one.
So what is the benefit for the company to take this risk? What is gain?
Because they're gonna benefit from like providing the service. Like, let's say, for example, you have again they have a service, a software, right?
Okay. Yes.
You have subscribers. The money. There is some risk associated with this software. They say, okay, I'm not gonna take the risk. I'm just gonna purchase an insurance policy. If something happened, the insurance policy will take care of the consequences. See my point?
Okay.
So the benefit is they actually release the software. They are getting money. They are contracting an insurance policy, paying some amount of money. If something, they will take care of it.
Okay.
Risk sharing, for example, if let's say again you are a software company, but you are using a third party service from a third party. Now, maybe this risk coming either from your organization or from a third party company. So you say, I'm not going to take it all. I'm not going to take the risk all. Let's split it half and half. So this is again risk sharing, right?
Yes.
So just like kind of a way of managing the risks between the two companies. Is that clear?
Yes.
So again, this is a process summary. So context establishment. Okay, so understanding the organization, the nature of data processing, what is the privacy risk that might happen. Risk assessment, which is again identifying, analyzing, and evaluating the risks. Again, this needs some experience and technical knowledge. Risk treatment, how are you going to deal with such risks? What are possible safeguards that you will take? Or are you going to dodge the consequences into an insurance company, into a third-party company, and so on? There are two more steps that I kind of, I skipped, but it's worthy to mention it here. Communication and consultation, right? So once you identify the risk and treat the risk, you have to communicate your findings with other companies. And also, if you have, let's say a risk that you don't know how to deal with, you consult other companies. So this is, knowledge sharing is really important concept in information security. That's why I remember when I spent some time in a security group in Saudi Arabia. I remember one of the group, they always have maybe a weekly or daily meeting or with other important departments, whether in Aramco or in Saudi Arabia, and they share, warnings and so on. And they also have, a communication channel with NCA. So whenever there is an attack, or whenever there is, a potential attack, they heard about something, they're always on alerted, okay? And along with the severity of that attack. And this is a common thing. I was working with the SOC team, the Security Operations Center team. That's why, they have to be always alerted about all the, hackers' activities around the world. And the last one is monitoring and review. So of course, this process has to be monitored and reviewed continuously, because again, it's not only before, not during, not after, but like a kind of combination or kind of combination of all or at all stages. The last two slides here is what is the output of this process. One output is what is called the privacy impact assessment or the data protection impact assessment, right? PIA or DPIA. In GDPR, they call it DPIA, which is tomato. It's just like a report, a deliverable article that kind of assess the impact of the privacy in this organization. And commonly, and this is kind of extracted from GDPR policies. In any DPIA or PIA, you have to identify the parties who are like the involved parties in this process. What is the nature and data scope, the purpose of data processing, and the compliance requirement. What are the like the specific requirements of GDPR principles that you are like going after. So basically, this is something like context establishment. And then it goes over 4 cycles, iterative cycles. Defining the context, establishing the controls to ensure compliance with fundamental principles, assessing the privacy risks, and validating the attained data protection level. So how it's different from risk management? Data privacy impact assessment is a sub-process of the risk management process, and this is intended to give an early indication of like what privacy impact that might happen. Okay, so again they use it interchangeably, whether it's privacy risk management, privacy risk assessment, privacy impact assessment. The last two is sub-processes of the big process, which is the risk management. But again, I found that like there is lots of overlap between them. So it's really important to understand all these processes. So later on, when you go into in the company or so, and you let's say you're a software developer who are launching a new software, you have to at least do one of those processes to kind of assess the privacy risks or privacy impacts. Okay. Any questions so far? Right. So I think that's it from my side, from the lecture point of view. Now we would like to break into groups, and I would like you to get together and discuss these concepts or these steps, the 6 steps, on a real use case, which is the contact tracing application. So let me give you a brief introduction, or a brief kind of let's say introduction to contact tracing apps. You see, in COVID-19, governments resorted into a way or a mechanism to track infected people who potentially infected people who came in contact with, like positive cases, right? And they wanted to do this in a large scale. So the common way, or the traditional way, is to do it manually. Meaning, if there's a positive case, right? Somebody calls this positive case and says, okay, in the last 14 days, give me the list of names and their contacts who you came in contact with, right? So this is prone to error because, first of all, nobody remembers everybody who came in contact with for the last 14 days. Maybe like they cannot be reached in a timely manner, and then they have to also, like contact their contacts and so on. So it's a very labor-intensive process. So the solution is to use technology, right? So can't we have a mechanism, or can't we have a way to contact all the individuals that came in contact with this positive case and their contact, right? So certain level of degrees. And it turns out, the first country that they use this is Singapore and South Korea. Okay, and however, they were not really effective because of so many constraints. And then many countries followed, including Saudi Arabia. We have Tabaud, right? Which is kind of implementation of Google and Apple APIs. The main concern, or the concern that really, there are two concerns. One is the performance, the accuracy of tracing all the kind of the infected people, and the other thing is the privacy, right? So now this is real, like manifestation of this utility privacy trade-off. In other words, if we have all the information for all people, right? We created one data center. Who contacted whom? Let's say by magically, you have all this information. Now, from privacy point of view, let's say the authority knows your location, where you were at each time, right? So this is obviously this is a breach of privacy. However, we will be able to contact all infected people instantly, right? So like not instantly, but quickly. So we'll be able to monitor and kind of control and confine this COVID-19. On the other hand, privacy, if everybody is concerned about his privacy, nobody wanna, let's say, share his data, then we will not be able to trace anybody. Make sense? So we wanted to come up with a solution, or the idea here is to come up with a solution to some extent, like trace all people who got potentially infected while preserving the privacy. Okay, so there are no solution or best optimized solution for but there are like some attempts. So this is kind of an idea of what is the goal of contact tracing. What I would like you to do is get together as in groups and think about what are the core functionalities. I already mentioned it to you, but also think about what other functionalities that you want to get out of these contact tracing applications. What data need to be collected? Okay, is just like GPS location is enough? Phone numbers is it? So what kind of data that you need to be collected in order to achieve the functionalities in the first question? And who are the stakeholders, right? Companies, health ministry, hospitals, users. Think about it, okay? And what are the security? Not really. Okay, again, our course in data privacy, right? So that's why I put. Don't think about security like like confidentiality and integrity. I want you to think about privacy. So think about the personally identifiable information, risk on PIIs that you can identify. Okay, and based on the controls that we talked about in terms of technical, either encryption, anonymization, pseudonymization, or policies or structures, give me some controls that you can think of to mitigate such risks. Okay, so just to keep the discussion organized, think about like those 4 questions and come up with kind of answers. And just kind of few instructions. So again, we'll break for maybe 15 minutes, okay? 20, 35, 25. Yeah, so about 15 minutes. So in 1:25, you should come back to this room, general meeting, and I will be, like dropping by and listening to your, maybe participating in the discussion. And then I will give you 2 minutes for each group. I'll give 2 minutes for each group to share their findings. And last time somebody spoke up, right? Somebody from the group. I would like to get to hear from someone else. So make sure whoever spoke last time, give the chance or give the turn to another one. Okay? Because I'm recording this, it's part of your group discussion and so on. Make sense? Any questions?
Clear.
Okay, so go ahead, join the groups, and 1:25, 1:26, we'll be back here. Okay. Okay, Khalid, yeah, do you have a group? طيب شباب. I think we are missing 4 groups. So let us give them maybe a couple of minutes or 1 minute. Then we can start. So this time we'll start. Last time we started from group 1 to group 7. Now let's flip the order. So let's start from group 7 to group 1. Okay. And again, please, for every group, if you can, nominate someone, elect someone to speak, someone different than the last time. Okay. And I have the name for those who spoke last time, but I just want to double check. So if you can let me know who did speak up last time, so I can also record the names. Okay. Just let me tell them. Okay. So let's start with group 7. Who's gonna speak up from group 7?
عمار.
طيب مين نتكلم الاسبوع الماضي؟
عبد الله الشيخ.
Go ahead.
Okay, for question 1, what are core functionalities? 1, tracing the location of all users. 2, recording occurrences of contacts within a diameter of 2 meters. For question 2, GPS location or Bluetooth, status of the user, and personal identifying information. For 3, stakeholders, MOH, CITC, MOI, SADAIA, and the users that are using the application. For question 4, privacy risks, information leakage, and who's got infected and who's not. For question 5, applying pseudo anonymity. That's what I'll go.
طيب خليني أسألك. ما دام you opted to speak up. What do you mean by information leakage in the privacy?
Maybe the phone numbers or IDs.
Any other? All your members can also interject. So what do you mean by information leakage and who gets infected or not? So what do you mean? What is that privacy risk? How is that privacy risk?
I mean, you can know if that person has infected or not. Maybe he doesn't want to share this information with other users, the application.
Okay. So what you're saying is you want to trace. So one core functionality of contact tracing app is to trace who got infected, right? Without exposing the identity of that guy who potentially infected you, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. طيب يعطيك العافية عمار.
Right.
On group 7. طيب let's go with group 6.